Hi, I'm Bree Johnson, and this week's lesson, this week's tutorial is all about sustainabilizing Warrior 3 pose. Now, sustainabilize is a word that I made up, and I encourage you to use it because it's a great word. Hashtag sustainabilize, please. Because it's all about ways that we can bring biomechanics, different movement ideas, how to bring into your yoga practice to make it healthy and sustainable for the long term. So looking at Warrior 3, there's one cue that I find not so helpful. The cue where we want to try to get your pelvis level. So I'll do that here in my body. So I'm going to go into Warrior 3 legs. I'm not going to do anything with my arms for now. I'm going to try to bring my pelvis level. And so when I bring my pelvis level, that ends up putting a lot of pressure in my hip joint. It gives me this compressing feeling. So this is my femur bone, hip joint, pressing down. And it kind of takes some of the work out of the surrounding muscles around the hip joint, right? So what we want to actually do is do a version of this pose, and we're going to play with this today. We're going to do a version of a pose where we can think about keeping some lightness, some space in your hip joint. And by keeping space in your hip joint, you're actually going to start to feel all of your amazing muscles from the back to the side to the inside, all around your hip joint start to wake up and do the work of holding you there on one leg. But what might end up happening is that the end result of the pose is that you're actually going to end up not having a level pelvis, and that is okay. So don't try to square your hips. We're going to just throw that cue out for this tutorial, and we're going to come into this with a more open, playful, experimental mindset of how can I be in this pose where I can keep a sense of spaciousness in my hip joint. So let's go through it together now. So that was our prelude to it. So now let's actually feel that in our body. So let's bring one foot. I'm going to bring my left foot forward. You can use blocks. I have them here, but I'm actually going to cue this and come in from it from a standing position. So first, you're going to start to put a little bit of weight onto your right or onto your left foot. Now, here's something. So if you've been watching the last couple weeks of Movement Mondays, you'll have noticed that we were doing a lot of stuff with the pelvic list. So now by this point, maybe you're familiar with the pelvic list. If you're not familiar, I recommend scrolling through the news feed, scrolling through the videos, wherever you're watching this, and finding the video on the pelvic list that I did. Watch that, press pause, watch that, come back, and then let's revisit this. But if you know the pelvic list, you are going to come into it with me here. So standing onto your left foot, I'll show it on the front, standing on your left foot, slide the left side of your pelvis down. And already standing in this pelvic list, you're aligning your hip joint over your ankle. And then I'm right now, before going anywhere else, I'm holding this pelvic list, I'm shifting my hips back, and I'm going to start to feel like I've got a little bit of space, right? So I'm getting that little space between your hip joint and your femur bone. And it's more of a feeling of spaciousness, right? So that we're not dropping down. Try that for a second. Drop down into your hip, and you'll notice that there may feel that sense of compression, that sense of collapsing into the joint. So again, we're gonna slide the left side of your pelvis down over your ankle. Get a sense of, invite that sense of heaviness, we don't want heaviness, invite that sense of lightness in and around your hip joint. Keeping your hands onto your pelvis, we are going to start to tilt down. Feel your pelvis tilting down, down, down. And I only want you to go down, explore this, see if you can only go down as far as you can maintain that sense of lightness in your hip joint. So for some of us, we might actually just go this far. For others, you might find that you can get a little bit more of that movement, that hinging action in your hip joint without dropping down and compressing. So I'm going to hold it right here, and I keep feeling like there's this nice sense of space around my hip joint. My leg that's in the air is going to actively stretch out a little bit more. And breathe. So coming back out. So you'll see the work that you're experiencing in this pose might have changed a little bit. And that's the point, because also too, I'm always talking about variety and diversity, bringing different ways to move in familiar poses, because that just is what your body wants and needs for a nice sustainable practice. And as I said before, you're going to notice that your pelvis is not going to be level, and that's okay. it is still a warrior three pose if your pelvis is not level. Again, looking for diversity, looking for different ways to get in, and specifically with this new cue is looking for ways that I can keep a sense of space instead of that habit. Even when we stand, we might have this habit of drifting from one side to the other and putting the pressure on the hip joint. Then you take that same pressure and then bring it into the standing pose where you have more work and more weight on that leg, and it may not be a happy place for your hip joints. So think lightness, think space, feel the new muscles surrounding your backside, especially wake up. Play with this in your practice, see how it feels, introduce it to your students, see how it feels for them if you teach. And we'll see you again for our next tutorials. By the way, don't forget to, if you like these tutorials, they're coming out every week, Movement Mondays. You can subscribe to YouTube. You can go to my website and sign up for my weekly newsletter to get these tutorials right into your inbox. Always sharing information for you guys. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you for the next one.